What I thought we would do first is just a quick orientation to some of the terrain here, and then we're going to walk up to McCook's position, you know it. Stick the maps that Dave gave you in the backpacks.
You want another one?
No, I've got them here. I just stuck them in the bag. For right now, we're going to make reference to the map that is right here. The first map in the pack map handout. If you want to orient this with the ground, north is the top of the map, and north is in this direction. In general, this road, Jays Mill Road, runs north and south, although you see it's got a couple of little cricks and bends in it. The edge of the battlefield park is just right over here, and so there is some pattern of fields and forests, which factors into to this sum off of the battlefield park area there. But what we're going to concentrate on is stuff from where you see Jays Mill on the map, off to the northeast, northwest and west of where we are right now. But the one thing I want to point out from right at this point is that if in 1863 you had gone south on the Jays Mill Road like the bicyclist is now, you would have gone down there just less than half a mile, about 3/8 of a mile distance, and you would have entered a very large open area, a complex of farms, the Youngblood family being the principal family, but that farm area extended on off to the east, to the Ballou and Catlett farm area, and so there basically is this big farm zone down here running east and west, extending to the west of the Jays Mill Road and running eastward. And the further you went eastward towards Chickamauga Creek, the soil gets better and there is more open ground. And the creek also makes a big bend, flowing, and you would be going upstream. It flows on eastward from Fowler's Ford, and then makes this great big bend to come back around to Alexander's Bridge. And again, that's something you can see on some of the other maps. But that big Youngblood farm area down there is going to factor some into this story. But there are woods just down there in 1863, and then here at Jays Mill there was a lot more open ground. Now, Jay's Steam Sawmill was a steam-powered sawmill, a portable steam engine, a steam boiler and firebox, and all of the fixtures, kind of like the front end of a locomotive, minus a cab and with different wheels on it. The boiler, the cylinder, the pistons, the driving rods, the stack, the firebox, and it was on iron wheels, or most of them were on iron wheels. We don't know a lot of the details of this one, but that was the engine. And then there was the sawmill system itself, and a belt drive would have transferred the power from the engine to the sawmill. It was set up here. I wish we knew more about it. I've never seen a really great soldier description or anything of it. I think it was kind of such a common sight that nobody bothers to describe it. The only story I've ever heard about it from the local families here is from a fellow who's now deceased. He said that the engine, or the boiler, the steam engine itself, was so heavy that when it was taken across Reed's Bridge, they had to reinforce Reed's Bridge. But I don't know really the origin of the story. He was from an old, long-time family here, and he said that was the story in the family. So, and exactly why it is here, I don't know that either. They are obviously cutting lumber, and we have descriptions of this first part of the field as having stumps in it. So have trees been cut down for saw logs, and they then sawed up. Just to the west of here in the woods, you run into some soldier accounts that talk about felled timber, and then further to the west in the Brock Field area on the north side of Brotherton Road, there is a large area of felled timber. And so is Jay sawing stuff up. It is only 7 miles from right here to the Western and Atlantic Railroad. And what does the Western Atlantic Railroad use an awful lot of? Wood. Both, I think this is probably too far to carry fuel, but exactly what you said, ties. Are they cutting ties out here for the Western Atlantic Railroad, or bridge timbers, or something else?
Would an operation like that, would it have been enclosed in any type of shed or building?
It could, but there are photographs at the time of the Civil War of both military and civilian sawmills, steam-powered ones like that, where they have built a protective shed enclosure. But I've never seen any reference to a shed or anything here. So
no, I don't know of any. The normal practice, if you stay at a place very long, is to build a shed with a top and no sides. But I have no idea what Jay did.
I've always assumed if there was anything, it would only be like a pavilion.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a structure, and there have been a lot of very disappointed people over the years when they found out that it was not a romantic big building with a water wheel on the outside.
Just some guy with a big wagon and a lot of metal.
Any idea how long the mill was here?
I'm sorry?
Any idea how long the mill was here? Before the
probably only a year, 2 years at most. And that's based off of some. Jay is involved in some land transactions in this greater area, and those are in 1862. But that I don't necessarily know that there's any connection between the sawmill operation and the land transactions. So,
a lot of the time they would buy up the timber and cut it and then sell it and move on somewhere else.
Yeah. But it is a feature that is on the battlefield, and I think it has something to do with the landscape itself. Now, why is the mill located right here? What does a steam engine need an awful lot of?
Water.
After wood, water. And at the time, there was a spring here. Now, fortunately for you all, we've had a lot of heavy rain recently. As a result, there has been water running just off of the landscape. But also, it has recharged the upper part of the aquifer. And again, this spring, kind of more formalized by this little rock enclosure here, subsequently, this spring is actually flowing a little bit now. And this spring produced enough water to keep the water in the boiler of the sawmill. And remember one of the things we talked about back in the visitor center. What are soldiers looking for? Water. This spring is going to be an attractant for troops on both sides, because it provided some quantity of water. Now, in 1863, it would have been providing less water than, say, in early 1862 because of the effects of the drought. Today, in most summers, this spring basically dries up entirely, except that a little bit of water still percolates up through it, and this vegetation right in here is a little greener in the summertime than the surrounding vegetation. Today, most springs, most of the historic springs, including Crawfish Springs, do not flow anywhere near like they did 150 years ago at the time of the Civil War. Because there are more of us, we pump more water out of the ground, and the water table has lowered, and so water is not as high to feed those higher springs. And so this spring in the summertime basically isn't here at all. Okay. Well, I'm going to get back across. Now, there was also a field here, and some people in the National Military Park have been trying for decades and decades to get a field back here once again. But we have about a third of a field right now. And so on our way to McCook, I thought I would point out a little bit of where this field actually was. One corner of it is here. We are fortunate that one of the field cornerstones, there it is, right over there, indicating a field corner is still here, erected by the veterans. The south edge of the field ran westward in the woods there, and we'll walk out and kind of describe that south edge of it. Of the field had a little jog in it. This is one of the corners. We were fortunate that in addition to a survey grade map that was produced in the spring of 1864 by Union Topographical Engineers, that when the National Military Park was created in the 1890s, one of their desires was to restore the battlefield to an appearance very close to what it was in 1863. After the war, this area had become much more open in this area, and so they were going to actually have to plant this area up. But they also researched the veterans themselves and also their engineer, Edward E. Betts, and produced the troop movement maps for the battlefield, which show the terrain and landscape. We have that map, which is it geo-references real well to the real world today. And as part of this larger project to try to get this area restored, we have geo-referenced this Jay's Mill area about as closely as we can, and these yellow stakes that are out here mark some of the corners on it. But we're now on the very south edge of the field, and we need to walk up in that direction. Folks should be able to look beyond me and see that next set of stakes right up there. Can everybody see the yellow stakes? Okay, that is the southwesternmost corner of the field. At that point, the field turned northward and ran off in that direction. So at the time, from right here, we would have open area over there, another 50 yards, 75 yards or so, and then all of this up in this area would be open. Some of you can probably see through the trees well enough to even see a few vehicles moving on Reeds Bridge Road up there. So all open area in that direction. Starts to change your perception of this part of the battlefield, doesn't it? Okay. What we're going to do now is go down. Oh, I should say one thing. This little this area out in here is shown on the map as being cultivated, as having had a crop in it in 1863. What we're going to do now is go down this slope. We're going to recross our wet weather drainage. The inside corner of the field. All that area down there was open. almost to the Brotherton Road, down to the south boundary as we talked about previously, and opens area off in that direction. And then all of this was open as well, up to Reed's Bridge Road there. And the field was kind of L-shaped. This is the vertical part of the L, and this is the short lower part of the L. And this ran out to a corner, and I could not find the stake out there when I started you all down through the blackberry patch. And I'm going to have to come back out here and walk and look for it more carefully. Somebody may have pulled it up. But anyway, all that area was open in that area, and that is what is described as being cultivated at the time. I've never seen anybody who said what crop had been in it, but the Park Commission map shows it as being cultivated. This area had brush and stumps in it. Had not been cultivated recently or at all. But a much larger open area here than what you see today on the battlefield parks. Let's walk on up.
Before we do that, we should point out that on the night of September 18th, while this had been the scene of fairly heavy traffic during the day, Confederate infantry columns moving south on the road, this was essentially no man's land by the night of the 18th. The Confederate picket line, Company K of the 1st Georgia Cavalry, is south of the spring down that road.
Towards the Youngblood farm.
And probably 200 or 300 yards south of it. Union pickets that are posted from Cook's Brigade, where we're going next, come into this field somewhere, and they certainly close off the Reed's Bridge Road, but they don't go as far south as the spring. They're probably still somewhat to our north, and for most of the night really oriented more that way than this way, though there is a flank line that's down here.
You think they can see each other's campfires?
Well, they're not supposed to have any.
McCook does not allow fires in his camp, and I have not seen a McCook account that says that they could see Confederate campfires. Law is camped on the other side of Reed's Bridge, and maybe even over a land feature, a rise of ground that puts the main encampment area out of sight of Reed's Bridge. And then, of course, the next closest Confederates are the 1st Georgia Cav guys down here, and the main body where any fire would have been allowed is much further to the south. So,
a Confederate named Shropshire says just before dawn that he saw some cold Union pickets huddled around a campfire somewhere down closer to the spring. And who knows?
And initially, McCook's picket line here does not include the spring. The spring is just outside the picket line. They will find the spring at the sawmill, but it is not included in their picket lines.
Is this wood, with the cleared out, more representative of what the wood was at the time of the battle?
Right, yeah. The open range grazing, turning the livestock loose, eating the low-growing, low-hanging vegetation, made for visibility, 150, in some places even up to 200 yards down through the woods. So in this area, we have concentrated a little bit of landscape rehabilitation effort to thin the vegetation, but we're having to, because the National Park Service is really more the Natural Park Service. Much of the landscape rehabilitation is having to be couched as exotic control. And the Chinese privet on this battlefield is getting very, very dense in lots of places, including in this area. And so we're having to use a relatively aggressive technique to attack the Chinese privet, but that is also thinning the vegetation.
Jim, don't you mean the damn Chinese privet?
Well, I'm in public, Dan. You know, when it's just you and I, those four-letter words similar to that can be applied. So, but you know, and you can see how much you know I like Chinese privet. You know, standing here, I've already begun to produce another privet bouquet. So, so. And in this area, Mr. Sikowski and I try to be a little more aggressive in our exotic vegetation management to also start getting it closer to having no trees on it. So. Okay, well, let's walk on up to the field. The field out in this area, the wood line running down to that stake that we just left. Woods off in that direction. Look up the corridor of the Lafayette Road as we're going to walk now, and you should be able to see the monuments up there to Dan McCook. Starts to give you some idea of the distance between McCook and behind him Mitchell's position, and this field, and probably also their skirmish line. My sense is that one of the officers of McCook's brigade says their skirmish line was 200 to 300 yards in front of the brigade line, and while there's a 100-yard variation in that estimate there, when you do some other calculations, where it makes most sense for the skirmish line to be is probably right here. And so technically the intersection is outside of McCook's skirmish line, and in fact the first of the Confederates rounded up around that intersection are rounded up by McCook's scouts as they come in, and we'll talk about that when we get up on the position there. I think that'd be a great job for convicts. Okay, I pause here. This is one of the original field cornerstones, but this is not actually a field corner. As I said, in the post-Civil War period, this property changes hands. It becomes the property of the Peters family. And they have several farms here, and they clear a lot more acreage, dramatically more acreage, by the time the Battlefield Park is created. So in the first years of the National Military Park, as they begin to work towards reestablishing the historic landscape, about the best thing they can do, since those those corners down there on the far western edge of the little L part, the bottom of the L, are out in the big open field. So they marked where they would be by putting this marker up here on the edge of the road due north of that north-south western line. And this all matches up on the maps when you scale it and the like. So this is marking that western edge down there where we were earlier. But this was woods in 1863. But it's been damaged some, but not as badly as lots of the other ones on the battlefields.
Well, we're waiting for the good jet. Your time machine shaft to be there. They talked for your video thing that you learned on 50th September?
No. There other tours are being done, but not that particular one. So. Yeah, at least that's not on the planning schedule.
I'm just trying to figure out what my granddaughter.
We are doing.
I don't know if I want to come back up or not.
Yeah. well, yeah, it'll be probably a while before we do something like that. Okay, we walk down here to Dan McCook's position. McCook's brigade is moved from Rossville on the afternoon of September the 18th. The soldier accounts variously saying that they began to move at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So it's towards the latter part of the afternoon. They march from McFarland Spring, or the spring at Rossville, at the Ross House. They are actually, at that time, all three brigades are camped on the west side of Missionary Ridge. And all three of Gordon Grange's brigades are going to begin to move. Dan McCook's brigade will march south down this way to support Minty, who has been through the day trying to delay the approach of Bushrod Johnson. Whitaker's and Mitchell's brigades will march out, first going on to the old Federal Road, the road going towards Ringgold Bridge or Red House Bridge or Ford, and then Mitchell will be diverted down this way. Dan McCook marches southward on the Lafayette Road and then turn eastward and southeastward on the road towards Reed's Bridge. They are less specific about their route coming in, but it is almost certainly that northern arm of Reed's Bridge Road, what is today Forest Drive in Fort Oglethorpe. They join this corridor back in that to the west of us, and then march out along here, and they arrive here near the edge of a large open area. And McCook will then deploy his brigade. He will put the 4 units, 3 regiments on the front line. The 85th Illinois is on his left. Then Barrett's battery, Battery I, 2nd Illinois Light Artillery, are on and just to the left of the road. And on the south side of the road is the 52nd Ohio and the 86th Illinois to the south. And then back behind will be the 69th Ohio, who is attached to McCook's brigade at this time, and the 125th Illinois. Now, McCook's brigade is actually going to have several formations while he is out here. And the order, this initial deployment order is a little bit different than what Dave shows on his map. Also the placement of the monuments. But in that first deployment at dark, when they begin to deploy the skirmishers, it's 85th Illinois, the battery, 52nd Ohio, and 86th Illinois down in that direction.
Basically, they got this monument wrong.
I'm sorry?
They got this monument wrong. They
Well,
down there.
Yes, at least the order of these two monuments needs to be flip-flopped. But again, they're going to have multiple positions out here by the time they leave the next morning, and I've not seen any indication in the correspondence by the veterans about exactly how they came to this placement of monuments. The biggest thing that you see in any of the correspondence about monument placement out here is that Dan McCook's guys in the post-war period want to be the ones to fire the first shot in the Battle of Chickamauga on September the 19th. And they're going to take all kinds of measures to try to get that carved into the history books, including having small markers for the 85th, 86th, 125th, and Barrett's Battery produced and erected out at Reed's Bridge. None of them were anywhere close to Reed's Bridge. but they want to make that as the history. So, and in fact, Major James T. Holmes of the 52nd Ohio, while he does not come back here, his brother who was in the regiment does, and his brother will tell him that when he visited here after the monument to the 52nd was erected, that his brother felt that the monument was about 75 yards too far to the east from where they were in line on the night of the 18th, in the early morning hours of the 19th. Moving the McCook's front line back about 75 yards or so actually helps a little bit with the placement of the skirmishers out there in front. So, I think that makes some sense. The Illinois Battery guys even talk about being up on a higher rise. And you can see that there is a little bit of a rise right up there. That white pickup truck's just about to go over it. Watch the white truck as he goes over. You'll see that he kind of levels off there. It's not as easy to see, but so if you move it back westward just a little bit, it actually kind of fits in here. But they arrive out here. Dan McCook's advance is screened by an impromptu formation of scouts. Dan McCook's brigade had been positioned in Middle Tennessee when they were ordered to close up on the main body of the Army, but no cavalry was provided them to guard their advance, and so McCook took the opportunity of creating a scout formation, acquiring animals. He has mounted men from all of his regiments and the battery, and they have actually screened his advance southward out of Middle Tennessee down into Alabama, eastward across North Alabama, including through the tank community then, what is today Gurley, Alabama, which gave them an opportunity to visit revenge upon Frank Gurley's property for Frank Gurley's involvement in the death of Robert Latimer McCook earlier on. And they'll then march on to Stevenson and then march in here. The impromptu mounted scout formation is still serving that function, and they are the ones who push beyond the skirmish line and actually will round up the first of the Confederates who are passing through that intersection up there. Later on, particularly during the night after it is dark, some of the Confederates that they wind up capturing actually don't know they're supposed to turn back there at the intersection. They simply walk into the picket line, come further to the west. And the scouts, at least some of them, seemingly continue to operate out beyond the picket line during the night. Darkness comes. McCook orders his men to sleep on their arms. They open ranks. The men lay down without undressing or taking their accoutrements or anything off, literally with their weapons in hand, so that they can spring to action if needed. It gets cold enough to frost that night, and about midnight, off in this direction, beyond the skirmish line, there is a little fight. The scouts have gone out and bumped into the 1st Georgia Cavalry skirmishers off in that direction. Immediately, the men are awakened, and line of battle is formed once again. After a few minutes, when nothing more develops from that brief little encounter, the men are ordered to lie down again. The next morning, as dawn approaches, McCook will begin to analyze the situation here. He will send his attached regiment, the 69th Ohio, out to try to burn Reed's Bridge. and they will march out eastward on the Reedsbridge Road, preceded by a small advance guard. They've got skirmishers and flank guards out. They march out towards Reedsbridge. At the same time, having sensed that there must be some Confederates down in that direction, McCook begins to reorient both his own brigade and John Mitchell's brigade, which has arrived and gone into bivouac behind him. And he's going to reorient them and turn and face to the south. And this is where it gets really confusing in the troop movements and the alignments. And I'm not confident that I've got it figured out after this point. And I'll let Dave and Glenn add anything they want to that.
My positions on the map are somewhat approximate because these guys were never fully engaged. We don't have, and when they were engaged, they were reoriented to face more this way. So,
and a couple of them are contradictory about who is to their left or right, and also even the means by which they turn to face to the south.
When I first drew this map, I relied heavily.
Glenn, do you have any thoughts?
No, the only thing I would say from a historian's perspective is when you get accounts that are at variance with one another and they seem equally good, you can spend an enormous amount of time trying to sort it out, and eventually you just have to make a call and move on. And I'm currently writing on the campaign, and I've left the details of this. That'll be in the future. And eventually I'll be sitting down with all these accounts that you guys have already worked with, and I'll make some sort of judgment. In the end, you know, what does it matter if you're a real dyed-in-the-wool historian? You want to get it right. But sometimes you just can't be sure you've got it right.
You will never have the last piece.
And you will never have the last piece. I've got 38,000 plus note cards on this campaign and battle. And I got a half-inch stack 2 days ago here of Xerox out of the park files because I hadn't collected here in years lately. There is stuff all over America. And the more you find, the more you're able to sort out these contradictions. But this is one of the contradictions that I haven't yet sorted out. So
ultimately, it's probably a fairly minor point, but for those of us who focus on it, it matters. We try and get it right.
Well, if you get the little things wrong, people will start, as they read it, as you folks, the consumer reads it, you'll say, maybe the big things are wrong in what the guy says. So you've got to get the little things right.
Sam?
You maybe covered this back in the what's McCook's orders right now? What's he here to do?
He marched out here to support Minty. Minty, from the time that he first engaged the advancing Confederates of Forrest and Bushrod Johnson on the morning of the 18th, has been screaming for reinforcements. Because very quickly in his contact that morning, he realized that the number of Confederates advancing towards him was significant, and particularly relative to his number, and that there were Confederates advancing westward both to his south and southeast and to his northeast and north. And he can't cover all of that zone between Wilder and Granger to the north. So he's been screaming for reinforcements. And that actually worked to a degree because he called on Wilder down at Alexander Bridge. And at that time, Wilder was not pressured down at Alexander Bridge. Wilder also looked at his terrain and said, I've got generally good defensive terrain there. And early in the, well, I shouldn't say early, it's early in the fight, but it's late morning, almost midday. Wilder responds by sending Minty 2 of his regiments and 2 of his 3-inch ordnance rifles. while Minty was still fighting to the east of the creek. Minty gets those, he immediately sends them, and they actually go to Minty by riding east across the creek at Alexander's Bridge, riding north on the east side of the creek, joining Minty. Minty says there are Confederates threatening to cross up at Dyer's Bridge and Dyer's Ford. It's some of Forrest guys. And so those two regiments are sent back across the creek at Reed's Bridge. They ride north and take position overlooking Dyer's Bridge and Dyer's Ford. They wind up doing nothing, as it turns out, because Forrest gets drawn into the fight with Minty and Bushrod Johnson. But it's an illustration that he's demanding or calling for more reinforcements, and eventually Granger responds by sending him first McCook and then Mitchell. And McCook is told to go support Minty. McCook arrives in here about dark. Can't find any trace of Minty. His advance guard finds Confederates going through that intersection up there, including Confederate wagons. Johnson, now with John Bell Hood, they've come up from Reed's Bridge out there to the east of us. They've marched 3/8 of a mile from Reed's Bridge to that intersection and turned south down Jays Mill Road, along which we are parked. And so the general flow of Confederates is that way, but McCook's scouts encounter Confederate wagons going that way. Probably wagons that had brought something up and delivered it, and now they're going back to the rear. Or they are just, as Bragg had ordered previously, disencumber yourself of your baggage wagons, send them over to Gordon Springs, and those wagons might have been headed that way. So Minty gets out here, finds no evidence, McCook gets out here, finds no evidence of Minty, encounters Confederate wagon train movement, and says, "Oh shoot, what am I going to do?" And then, so the next morning, he's kind of in the same boat. So.
Hunkers down on the high ground.
Yeah, probably in the back, maybe even to that little rise up there. So
I want to read you one quick thing about this initial encounter in the dark, and I think this is attributable to, it's out of the regimental history of the 85th Illinois, and I think it's attributable to the brigade scouts. Sergeant Eli Shields of the 85th Illinois led a patrol that way.
Shields is one of the scouts.
Yeah. And another private who was along with him recounted the story. He talks that Shields was in the lead when we ran into the rebel army and had the nerve to sing out, "Halt!" To this, some thoughtful Johnny replied, "Keep your damn mouth shut." Hastily, the Federals pulled back, they dismounted, and then they came forward again. And as I suppose, they left, according to the private's account, they leave Shields behind with the horses. I thought that was funny. And then that's when they begin to take some of the Confederate stragglers and rear echelon people coming up the road. But the mounted scout formation that McCook forms here is pretty interesting of him by itself. It shows that the armies are adapting to their environment and not fighting quite exactly the way we think they're going to fight according to the textbooks.
And again, but there's a point where McCook goes back to Rossville.
Yeah.
All right. Is Granger coordinating with Army headquarters? What causes?
The Granger calls McCook back to Rossville. The only real connection in that with Rosecrans and Army headquarters is that Rosecrans had reiterated to Granger the need to guard that route into Chattanooga. And so now on the morning of the 19th, with two of his three brigades down here and only Whitaker up on the old Federal Road, Granger sends a note down to Mitchell and McCook and says, "Get back up here."
Does Thomas know they're here?
No, not when he arrives in the Kelly Field. He only learns about McCook when, as McCook marches out and Thomas has arrived at Kelly Field, they see one another. fact, John Mitchell, in a letter that Larry Strayer has, that I've not seen the whole thing. John Mitchell says that they saw the dust of Thomas's approaching column. It's probably not Baird and Brannan itself. It's probably more of the troops coming up. And exactly where Mitchell would have seen that from, maybe up on the highest ridge up here. But it's after dawn when he sees that. But McCook's situation now at dawn is different than what he had been sent out here the day before to do. It's obvious that that Minty's not around here anywhere, and there is evidence that there are Confederates out here and nobody in support of them.
There must be debris from the battle of the previous day scattered here and there, but you must have understand that something
Well,
significant.
it's more forward there.
Yeah, it's more forward of this position. So.
And if he had got here with enough light to send some of those scouts forward
the evening before,
they would have seen the casualties.
Right. When the 69th Ohio on the morning of the 19th goes out to burn the bridge, they will move into the battle zone of the day before, and there are several 69th Ohio accounts that talk about one particular